Wow, I started with a standing ovation. I'm so excited. I've never worked so little during a talk for a standing ovation before. No, that's awesome. I love my friends. Megan, she gives me a hug. She's like, "We're so professional," she says. Yes, you are. Thanks, you guys. You're like pulling up the conference. Like this is the last, the ending peak point. You know what I like doing towards the end is some really cool stuff. So that people that left, later they're like, "Oh man, I heard it was really good." And we're like, right? No, it's kind of funny. I love people that stay because the closing people are the real deal. They are the achievers, and they're like, we just want to take every opportunity that is there. You know, some people have children and things that are legitimate too. They had to leave for. They were like, "I'm sorry, I have to leave. It's not you." I know, I get it. So I just, first of all, want to acknowledge this. The reason I have this up there is I want to acknowledge you. And whether you wrote on here or not, what I know from doing work with people is that people are doing their work all the time, whether they look like it or not. So even when people are sitting there, in fact, I can't remember who it was, Kayla and I were talking maybe, and sometimes people are sitting there, and it's interesting when you're on stage because you see everybody, right? And some people, when they're just listening, they look really intense, right? They're like, you're like, they either hate me or they're really deep in thought. And I've learned in doing workshops that you can't tell. Sometimes people are really doing their work. Whether you wrote something up here or not, it doesn't matter. If you wanted to claim a ceiling that you want to break, or a belief that you want to break through, or a self-limiting habit or behavior or whatever that is, good for you. And you don't need to write it up there. We just talked about taking steps in order to make it happen. Because if you want to, yes, I believe the universe conspires to help you make things happen. I believe God does. But I also believe you have an active part of your miracle. So there's some people that are like, well, if the universe wants it to happen, it's just going to happen. Yes. I mean, you can't argue with that, right? It sounds really spiritual. I mean, and it is true. And the other truth is that sometimes the universe needs your help, right? So if I lay in bed and go, "Oh, come on, miracle, I'm ready," I'm just saying I think you could reduce your odds of it coming forth. Okay, that's not even what I was at all going to talk about, which is pretty much how my talks always go. All of these stories bring up, do you notice when you're sitting out there and you're hearing all these stories that it brings up stories in you? Stories of maybe stuff that happened at work or in your relationships. And it's interesting, all the things that come up. I started to write an autobiography some years ago. Haven't finished it yet, so somebody could be my buddy on that to hold me accountable to finish that. But it was weird because the expectation that I had, which is really interesting, right? Expectations. That's a whole other conference. The expectation when I started to write this was different than what I found when I wrote on the paper. Like what came out of me was different, which is cool because when you write, especially if you just really write, knowing nobody has to see this. I mean, I could rip it up and throw it away, or I can do edits, but just raw writing, just writing without filtering and all of that to see what comes up really unlocks the subconscious. And stuff that's there, but we just don't access it a lot, or we don't realize it's affecting us. And as I started to write my autobiography, I was surprised. Because my first couple of jobs, my very first job was Round Table Pizza, which was just super fun, and I just have no complaints about that because it was so fun and I was eating pizza. And apparently I want to go back there because I'm like, wow, that was great. And like when we were bored, we would make these little pizza dough balls, and we'd play miniature golf around the place. It was so great. But it was a little bit downhill from there because then I went into the restaurant industry. And my first couple of jobs in the restaurant industry, I experienced sexual harassment and realized it was a thing, right? I kind of had heard it without really tuning in a whole lot to it on media, or it was a little bit of a buzz back then. Oh, sexual harassment, blah, blah, blah. But I was working at Cafe Olé in Nampa because there used to be one. Yeah. And there was a guy, he was the manager. And long story short, he fired me one night. And actually, when I went into his office, I thought he was kidding. I go in there and he goes, "You're fired because you didn't fill the salt and pepper shakers last night." And I'm like, right? It's a Mexican restaurant. Nobody uses salt and pepper, and therefore none of us ever filled the shakers. But what I knew was I was a good worker, and I was honest, and I was always on time. And, you know, I was one of those people that people could count on, and my numbers were good, because even back then it was all about numbers. What did you sell? Did you upsell them on appetizers and drinks and desserts and yada, yada, yada? And I was one of those people, those overachievers even back then. And I thought it was a joke. And then he just looked at me. I said, I know, right? It was so funny. He's like, yeah, no, I'm serious. I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And he just stood there, and I went, oh, this is personal. He fired me because I wouldn't sleep with him. And he was really upset about that. So I got let go. And I didn't see it coming. And my idealistic little world that I had been in kind of came crashing down, because I did. I grew up in this great home, loving, and, you know, parents that were supportive, and we weren't perfect, but we were really loved and supported. I was lucky. And so adulthood was kind of devastating. It was like, this sucks. I thought this only happened on the things on TV. This doesn't happen in real life. Yes, it does. So I went to my next job, and what was interesting, good news. Let me give you some good news. So he was doing that to other people too. He was sexually harassing other girls. There was a girl when I was leaving that I knew it was happening with, and I thought, I've got to say something and stop this. And so I went to corporate, and I said, you know, I don't want my job back, but I want this man stopped, because it's not just happening to me, it's happening to others. And they went in and did an audit of that restaurant, and within a week they let him go, and then a few weeks later they closed the restaurant. It wasn't going well, as it were, with the numbers and stuff. But to realize it wasn't just about me too was powerful for me. So I went to the next restaurant, and you know what's weird is it started happening again. And so these guys came in from Oregon to a hotel chain out in Nampa, and this one guy, I won't say his name, but he would say things to me every night. Like if I had to do a wait shift or work a bar, he'd say, can you wear the short skirt? Or whatever. It was very offensive, and I just tried to blow it off and do the best I could, because like a lot of you probably, I didn't want to lose my job. You know, you worry about if I have a voice, if I do something, what's that mean? I'm 19, whatever I was at the time. What's going to happen? Well, another young girl came to work on the team, and I was the captain of the team at the time, and he was doing it to her too, and I thought, this has got to stop. This is so wrong. And you know what else occurred to me at that time? So I did. I stood up for all of us. It occurred to me that I didn't take action until somebody else was getting abused. And I thought, and I don't remember when that recollection, but it was after. It was after the fact. I went to the manager. I said, this is wrong. And of course, he had brought the guy in, and he goes, oh, you know, we'll just call him John, which is not his name. You know John. He's just kidding around. I said, yeah, I don't think his pregnant wife that works in the restaurant would agree. I think she'd be upset. So it was uncomfortable. I ended up leaving that job too. But as I left, I was like, man, it took me somebody else getting abused before I took a stand. And so for me, I had to take a look at my leadership in that moment and really my own self-care. Why does it take somebody else getting abused before I stand up for myself? Somebody else isn't more valuable than me, no matter what the voices in our head tells us sometimes. And so I used to tell this friend of mine that was a coach for a while, I said, yeah, I pull out my Joan of Arc sword and I fight. And that was like my saying for a while. And she goes, you realize Joan of Arc died at the stake, right? They burned her at the stake. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna quit saying that. But I often realized it was easier for me to fight for other people than for myself. And I say that because as a life coach for the last 15 years, what I know is that a lot of women do that. It's easier to market for somebody else. I can't self-promote. Why? You need to eat too. It's kind of how this all works. You need to, pay for your children's food. You need to pay for your mortgage. I can fight for her. I can defend her. I can defend a cause as long as it doesn't have to do with, as Kayla talked about earlier, some of my shame or some of the things that have happened to me. So what was interesting, though, as I started to write this autobiography is a couple of the other things that came up, because I moved from restaurants into corporate America, and I had gone to school, NNU, for English education, speech communications, and so, of course, I went into finance after that, because I hate math. I really do. But good news, computers had arrived, and they were not good, but they were doing the math. And quickly in finance, I learned that there was this hierarchy, and it was interesting. They started me at the front desk, which was a really big problem because I'm not that good at like tills and detail and all of that. So I was a train wreck. When they interviewed me, they were like, "Can you do 10 key?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And I'm thinking, what's 10 key? By the time they know I suck, I'm just going to win them over, and then I'll learn how to do the job, and it's all going to be good. Which is kind of what happened. Like the first 2 weeks, I know they were all like, just look at each other like, you know? And I'm like, I got this, I'll get it. But I loved on the people. The people came in, and I loved on them, and I was selling loans. And at the end of the first month, I told my manager, I said, "I'm so sorry. I only sold 20 loans this month. I'm going to do better. Just give me a chance." He said, "Shelley, my loan officers don't even sell 20 loans a month. You're doing a good job." So they promoted me to be loan officer. What was interesting about the loan officer position is you were supposed to be a college graduate in order to apply for management. And I had stopped after 2 years because after 2 years of English education and speech communication, I went, I don't want to be a teacher. At least not that kind of teacher. Like part of me knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I went and did, this is a true story. This is what broke me through. I went to Caldwell and did some student teaching, and this little kid named Pancho, he hated me. Pancho, I don't know what it was. Pancho hated me. And he would set booby traps for me. I'd be wearing like nice dress because you had, at least at that day and age, you had to wear skirts and things to your student teaching. And so I'd walk past his desk and be like, you know, with, he would take, what do you call it, paper clips and open them up and tape them to the side of the desk right when I was going to walk by. You know, ruin my stuff. And Pancho, if you're here today, I want to hug you because Pancho broke me through, right? I was like, I do not want to do this. I do not want that. No. So it was cool. So I stopped and, you know, started working. And so as I got into this management trainee position, there was a cap, there was a ceiling because you weren't supposed to be able to apply for management unless you had the degree, and they preferred you had a finance or management degree. So I started working, and I went to Idaho Falls, and we were breaking numbers and doing really well. And I went out to have drinks with my district manager one night, who I really loved and respected. And I was, at that time, I was the top loan officer in our district, and working very hard. I was single, so I wasn't abandoning babies or anything, but I was single and just really seeing what I could do, really trying to prove to myself what I was made of. But the guy that sat next to me was like a nice guy, really nice guy, and he had the degree, but he would leave at 5, and then me and the manager would start to do his work. We'd take over and do his work. And at some point, I just got frustrated. I'm like, this is really stupid. He's making more money than me. He's in management training, and I'm not. And I'm doing half of his work. So I went out with this district manager, and after he had a couple of drinks, I said, hey, you know, so I'm a pretty good producer for you. Yes, we really appreciate it. I said, great. I said, so here's the deal. You know how this guy makes a lot more money than me? I don't want that to actually be the case because I'm producing more and I'm doing half of his work. So I would like a raise accordingly, at least at his level or above. So a few days later, my manager, who was really good friends with me, she pulled me into her office, and we had been a great team. She pulled me into her office, and she says, Shelley, did you sleep with Mr. Graham? And it was like salt and pepper shakers. What? It's like, have you met me? Do you know me? No. Have you met Mr. Graham? No. Like what? She said, well, you got the high, you know, the biggest raise that anybody in our company has ever had without actually going to the next position. And so, something's up. What happened? I said, I asked. And I told him I was going to move to Fiji and start weaving baskets and drink fruity drinks if he didn't give me the raise. It's literally what I said. I said, give me the raise I deserve. I will keep being amazing. I'll keep making you a bunch of money. And otherwise, I'm going to go move to Fiji and weave baskets and drink fruity drinks. And I was serious in that moment, too. And he was like, all right, I'll see what I can do. But But what was interesting for me at that moment was one of my good friends and a boss I had worked very hard with and for was asking me, when it's just not who I was or am, if I slept with somebody to get the thing that I went for. So that was a big message for me. And as I started to write my autobiography, I thought, man, if we're being fair, it's not only men or the system that have held women back. Is that fair? If I hadn't applied for the raise, would I have gotten it? And, the annual one that's like little tiny, I didn't want that one. So I would have never gotten it. They would have never thought about it. But also what happened with my friend was disconcerting. I had one other job. About the same time, I was doing finance and actually waiting tables at night also for a while because I was single and I thought I'm just going to work, see what I can do, see if I can kill myself. So I'm waiting tables and also got a promotion into a very, very, very nice dining room. And if you know anything about waiting tables, it's not easy to get into some of those dining rooms. A lot of people want those jobs. Some of those people make a lot of money. I know a guy that quit HP because he could make more money waiting tables in really fine dining. And I'm like, wow, that's legit. So once again, I was doing these banquets and stuff at night and on the weekends to make money, and I got promoted into the dining room. And once again, I had a woman say, did you sleep with the manager to get this position? So as I started to write this autobiography, what was interesting for me was, wow, I had a couple of issues with the men and then a couple of issues with women. Kind of even Steven in a way. Like it came in different forms, but I want to call that friendly fire. I want to call that friendly fire because why are we firing upon each other? And where do we think we're going to get by doing that? Now, I have a theory, it's just mine, but in working with people for the last 15 or 20 years, like women, and it could be true of minorities or somebody that's been abused or something like that, if they feel like the pie is smaller for them for some reason, and it may or may not be true, but if they feel like the pie is smaller for them, then sometimes we get really competitive, it feels like. The competitive rises up because it's like, I got to try to really grab that smaller piece. I got to fight for it because it's been taken from me in these other ways. And in a way, that's fair to feel that way, right? But I think we have to be careful about that, especially when we're fighting against the very people that could lift us up, and sometimes we end up doing the very things that we say that we're against. If we say we're against inequality and those kinds of things, then let's quit treating each other as women as unequal, right? So that was very interesting to me, and the friendly fire thing made me think about a story, and I'm going to tell this carefully because I understand that war is not a fun thing to talk about. Let's talk about war, kids! And nobody wants to talk about that, and it is unfortunate. I do love history, though, because I feel like we learn a lot from history. I think we learn what works. I think we also learn a lot about what doesn't work. What do we want to change? Where do we go wrong? I love the story of Hernando Cortez for that reason. I think there's a lot of life lessons in there that are interesting. So if you remember the story, Hernando Cortez, he goes to the Yucatan Peninsula, which many, many people had done before him, to try to capture, all of the gold. He said he did it with religious reasons, but that's very much debated, and who knows, because I haven't had a chance to interview him. He happens to be passed away. It'd be interesting to know. But he went, and a lot of people that tried before him failed. They went and they turned around halfway through, or they went and they all got sick and had to turn around or died, or they just chickened out because a lot of these people were outnumbered because the Aztec Indians were in the thousands. And so, a group of people would get on these ships and go over there, but they were always a bit outnumbered and they got freaked out and they turned around. So Cortez, he's like, we're going to go. Well, right at the last minute, his funding gets pulled from him. His funding gets pulled. Now, it's pretty easy, as a little life lesson in there, it's pretty easy to quit when your funding gets pulled, yes? It's like, I'm going to do this, and I have this sponsor, and I have this, and I have that. And then when it goes away, it's like, whoa. It can really cause you to think, oh my gosh, is this going to be okay? Because that fear can come up. But he went anyway. He's like, I'm going to put all my money in. He went all in, as we would say. And what he did that was interesting strategically is he went and got farmers, right, to be his army. Now, have you ever worked with farmers? They're amazing. You want amazing people that don't complain and they just go work? their faces off, and no matter what happens, they can fix it or do it or mend it. Or farmers. If you're raised on a farm, it's phenomenal. So he gets these farmers and they buy in. He gets people to buy in and put skin in the game, their equity in the game. How cool is that? I'm like, that's a pretty smart guy. He goes, but what's interesting is they were still way outnumbered, 400 men or whatever it was, however many ships. He gets to the shore and he looks at his guys and he goes, this is great, we're here. Now let's burn the boats. And they're like, what are you talking about? The boats are all we have, and a few guns. Just in case, we might want to. He's like, no, we're going to burn the boats. Because when we go home, we're going to go home on their boats, or we're going to die trying. He was definitely all in. I do think his intentionality was interesting. Like, of all the different records, there's a lot of them. He was really clear. I don't ever see where he wavered. Well, I don't know. He was so clear. Meanwhile, not so good news was all of the tribes were divided. All of these natives were divided against each other. They were fighting so much against themselves that it made Cortez and his men, it was pretty easy to pick these tribes out. They would just go one at a time, one battle at a time. You don't win a war overnight. You win it one battle at a time, which is exactly how this went. But I think to myself, man, why didn't they bind together? If they would have bound together, he or anybody else wouldn't have overcome them. They were so busy having their squibbly little fights that they missed the fact that the enemy was coming. And they didn't shore up and make changes and evolve and adapt in order to not only survive, but thrive as a culture. So it's a sad story, but I got to be honest with you guys, because it just can't be nothing but real. I'm just too old and I've been life coaching too long. I feel like that with women sometimes. We can feel so competitive, even if it's not the words that you say, it's the energy, it's the look. When somebody looks at you and it's not loving and supportive, right? And I know we're human and we're not perfect. I just think we can do better. I just think we can do more. I don't want to focus on what I can't do and get overwhelmed, because that's when we get stopped, is in the overwhelm. Right? And that's why there's too many good people not doing something about it. So and I go there sometimes, I do. And then Steve says, you can't do it all, you can't save all, you can't, bleeding hearts, Sheli, just calm down. I'm like, I know, there's a lot I can't do. Sex trafficking, that's one thing that overwhelms me. I want to do more. I don't know exactly what. But you know what? I need to do what I can with what I've got right where I am. That's what I need to do. I can't worry about what I can't do, what I don't have strengths in. I've got to do what I can do. And I guess I just want to put a challenge out to us as women that it's like we've got to stop it. We've got to stop the friendly fire. And that's relearning thought patterns and behaviors and actions, because your mind will just start to, somebody walks in the room and it's like Josh says, you don't know anything about them until you know something about them. You don't know what you don't know until you know it. But isn't it easy? Our minds just do this. But you can actually decide what you do with that judgment or that assumption or that expectation. You don't have to hang on to it. You don't have to believe it. Let the thoughts come and go, right? But we don't have to live there. And what about this collaboration? I mean, I'm just more in the question for you than I am giving you solutions. What can we do? How can we link arms? I think it's important. And so for me, it just kept coming up for me, we can talk about how men need to do more, but there's a lot of men that are doing a lot, yes? And they want to support us. And frankly, there's enough men still in high-level positions. We need their support. We need to collaborate. But I also feel like, boy, it's almost like starting outside of your family and trying to fix something else. It's easier to fix somebody else's playground than your own. I think as women, we need to clean up our playground. I think we need to really be loving and kind to each other, even when we disagree or even when we miscommunicate, which is usually what so many discrepancies are about. And I can love you and hold your vision and believe in it and support it, and it doesn't have to take away from mine, yes? Good news. I just think we can be better and we can do more. And that goes to all of us. I believe as a country, we can do more. I believe when we talk about race issues, religion, the sexual identity stuff, these are not easy things, right? They're not easy things. But we can always be respectful We can always be compassionate. And the times that we're not, we can own it and say, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry. Let me try that again for the first time and make this right. So I wrote a poem. Would you like to hear it? What are you going to say? No! Okay. Be nice. I just said to be nice. Oh, I'm going to warn you. It's a little bit long, but be with me. The divide that is between us today remains so deep and wide. I turn on my social, I watch the news and see victims on every side. I see wars, famine, sickness, and despair, so much that it overwhelms me. How can I be happy or rest while I know of the brokenness in the humanity? There were days in our past where atrocities were enabled, the like of which I cannot grasp. There were people who owned other people's lives, and it broke more than just the slaves' backs. Whenever bullying, abuse, rape, and killing are not just allowed but embraced, it rips a tear so deep in our country's soul that it takes more than just some laws or time to erase. When any life of any color, gender, or religion is lifted above or below another, we create the deepest of divisions. It is a terminal cancer that took hold long ago, and to remove it takes more than just the incision. When the law is free speech and it's perverted to empower words of hate, judgment, and pride, we've all lost the essence of the freedom we desire because part of our honor has died. We can't just say we are free and just and loving while we let thoughts of judgment in, especially if we rent that bias a room and cultivate its intention to win. You see, light is pure and true, and it cannot exist with evil and dark in the same place. So it sees darkness and it has to flee when the darkness refuses to be erased. When we're more committed to being right than we are to righteousness. When we're more committed to what we think that we know before subjecting our own ways to the test. When we see another and just assume that we know anything about that soul before we hear where they've been and what they believe and what they've done, because we judge that which we do not know. When we kindle our fear and our insecurity, barring the truth from getting in, while keeping the divide long and deep between our brothers who are innately our friends. When we let our differences, our past, our beliefs drive our tongues and our ways, we are doomed to live lives of smallness and scarcity versus the life of abundance that we all crave. How do we mend this huge rift created by so many of us? How do we address such a deficit when we feel so lacking of resources? Our spirits are weary, causing our bodies to be weak from the many years of war. And the ignorance, the apathy, the inaction of us now, does it mean we're no better off than before? Because we often still enslave each other today with control, intimidation, and hate. If we are to unhook from our broken past, it is time to clean the slate. It's time to apologize, to admit failure, and to grieve, not just for today, but for days past. If we truly want to begin anew and create a brotherhood to last, it's time to lay down our swords and our stones, and not just of mineral and metal, but the most damning of all weapons. Our mouths are the biggest way that we threaten. Let pride die and anger too. Let respect grow up in their place. Every soul that has breath deserves compassion, kindness, and grace. We need hope, yes? Passion and innovation, taking the place of scarcity, ego, and fear. We need to move towards the collective human tribe we were born in with pure hearts that are sincere. With the heart of a newborn, so innocent and pure, without judgment or prideful intent, let us move to close the divide that is here until every breath we take is well spent. To let the light invade and fill every shadow, there is but one way. Let us move forward boldly in love and justice, because only love will make the way. It sounds idealistic and unrealistic too, but that is the lie that we have believed. For with kindness, compassion, and trust, it is love that is conceived. What we think lives. What we believe manifests. What we meditate on expands. So let us bind together and cultivate love, so fulfilling our Maker's big plan. We are blessed and able, so long as we're willing to look at our divide from the ridge and begin to lock arms through kind compassion. That's when love can build a bridge. If you want to break your ceilings, if we want to break the ceilings, help our children break the ceilings. If we want to break the ceilings in our cultures and in our world, we've got to build a bridge.